Well, I've titled my message today, When You Need Another Chance. When you need another chance. And I do want to say that today there's actually going to be an opportunity to give your life to Jesus. Maybe you need renewal. Maybe you need to turn back to Jesus. There's also going to be an opportunity to follow Jesus' instruction of water baptism. Why does Jesus instruct us water baptism? I think there's a lot of reasons, but I think one reason is that we aren't just brains that float around. We're physical beings, and a physical experience becomes a memory marker. It becomes something you don't forget when your whole body is saying, I want to follow Jesus with my totality. I want God to flood over my whole life. And so today we're going to do the physical act of water baptism because the Bible teaches that we're physical beings and that God made a physical world. So you can follow Jesus in baptism today, and we have a handful of people who are signed up, and if you've already been baptized, I really invite you to come cheer them on outside. Well, we arrived at one of the greatest verses in the entire Bible, and that is John 21, verse 12. Would you look with me? We'll put it on the screen for you. And Jesus said to them, come have breakfast. Greatest verse in the entire Bible. Jesus said to them, come have breakfast. Man, I love breakfast. I don't know if you love breakfast. My kids definitely love breakfast because they will come down the stairs and they'll look me in the eye and they'll say, the most important meal of the day, and go on to eat 900 grams of sugar, right, before 7 a.m. They'll do that. And I think the reason why people love breakfast so much is it's the one meal where it's socially acceptable that every course is dessert. Like it's the one time that is okay. I mean, think about it. Pancakes, dessert. Fabulous French toast, dessert. Cocoa Puffs, dessert. Cocoa Pebbles, dessert. Lucky Charms, plays on Irish stereotypes, dessert. It's just like every single thing is dessert. You look at me and go, no, Jesse, I have a healthy breakfast. I just like to eat a protein bar. Yeah, your chocolate peanut butter protein bar, that is a Snickers wearing yoga pants. It's dessert. Like breakfast is dessert, and that's why we love it so much. And then Portland has just the most amazing dessert, even if you get onto the savory side. I mean, think about it. You've got gravy. You've got Pine State biscuits. On Mississippi, you have Broder. Up on Alberta, you have Proud Marys. You've got Pips on Fremont. You've got the Little Griddle. I mean, that's just Northeast Portland. That's not even getting into the other quadrants and zones. Like there is so much good breakfast. And I love this passage because I don't know if you noticed in the text, Jesus made them breakfast. They arrive at the shore, right? He repeats the miracle from the beginning of Peter's life. He repeats that miracle because Peter needs to go back to the beginning. But Jesus, they arrive there. He's already got the bread. He has fish. I guess he got the fish or bought the fish or caught the fish or made the fish. He's got fish there waiting for them. And he says to them, come have breakfast. And it actually implies that he hands them the bread. He serves them. He's like a waiter. He's making them breakfast. He would do great. He could get a job at Screen Door, And I think it's phenomenal, but we really need to realize, because we've been looking at the life of Peter. And here's Peter at the end of the gospel accounts. Jesus has been tortured and executed and crucified. He's been raised from the dead. If that's hard for you to believe, it was hard for them to believe as well. We've done in-depth messages about the historical, academic level evidence for the resurrection. You could check those out on our podcast. There's one called Egg Hunt from Easter you could check out. But here we are at the middle point of Peter's story, because we're going to continue on to the book of Acts. And this is Peter after every miracle, after every healing, after every calmed storm, after every captivating sermon, after the blazing glory of the transfiguration, after every astounding, astonishing thing that he's witnessed, after Jesus has washed his feet and instituted communion, after all of that, Peter called down curses on the name of Jesus, denied him 3 times, and swore to God that he never knew him. And how does Jesus respond? By making him a warm meal. That's how Jesus responds. And you could be here this morning in need of another chance. And the truth is, if you remember from the series, he gave him lots of chances, chance after chance after chance after chance. And maybe you're here and you can think back to a time recently, or maybe it was a time a long time ago, where you did something you were ashamed of. You did something where you said, I didn't even know I was capable of that. I didn't even know I could stoop that low. I didn't even know I could go that far. Maybe you did it last night. Maybe you did it last week. Maybe you did it 20 years ago. But all of us can probably think back to a time where we blew it. Maybe you can think of somebody else and you look at other people in the country and their policies or their behavior. Or you look at people in our city and you're disgusted with them and you're shocked. Maybe it's someone in your family. You go, how could you do that? I think we would do well to pay attention to how Jesus reacted to Peter. So our first thought is, when you need another chance, is go back to the beginning. Go back to the beginning. I didn't have BZ read the whole passage because it would just be really long, and I just wanted to give her a little break. But it's really amazing what happens here. So Peter, in verse 3, they've already seen that Jesus is risen, but Peter still has this guilt, this shame. And he goes, I can't be a disciple anymore. I've messed up too bad. Now he's risen from the dead. Like, I can't have anything to do with this man. I'm just going to go back and go fishing. And he's such a natural leader that like half the disciples come with him. And the truth is, if you choose to stop following Jesus, you're going to have an impact on others and influence others. You choose to leave the church, you're going to do that. But he goes out fishing, and I see it all the time. People have this flare up of spiritual excitement. They're coming consistently, for 6 months or whatever. And then something disappointing happens, something discouraging happens. Maybe they just get distracted. They go, I'm going to go live for my career. I'm just going to go back. I'm going to, whatever. I tried that God stuff, and they fizzle out. And maybe it just happens gradually. It happens slowly, drift. And they're going to go back to fishing. They go back to their old job. And that's exactly what Peter does. But did you notice what happens in verse 4? It says, early in the morning, Jesus, I apologize. Verse 3. So they went out and got into the boat, but that night they caught nothing. This is the exact same thing that happened to them the first time they met Jesus. The first time they went out fishing, Jesus came to them and their nets were empty. Maybe you've tried church for a while. You know what? I don't know about this thing. I'm just going to go back to my nets. I'm going to go back, focus on my career, focus on travel, focus on experiences, maybe focus on romantic relationships. None of those things are bad. But what Peter is doing is he's exchanging being a fisher of men just for regular fishing. It's priorities, right? What are your priorities? What do you really look to for your worth? Well, and you think, I'm going to go focus on that. Well, I had an interesting encounter. And I was meeting with a friend who took me to the top of a penthouse apartment complex, luxury apartments. And I'm sitting with this guy, and he's become a friend of mine. And he tells me, my whole life, I saw money as freedom. I wanted to make as much money as possible because for me, money represented freedom. I wanted to be going to chateaus in France, walking around vineyards with a glass of wine. So my dream was to make as much money as possible. So I became a day trader. And during the pandemic, towards the end of it, my dream came true. I was living in Napa Valley, and I made $960,000 day trading in 6 weeks. He goes, my dream had come true. Me and my wife, we went out. We were going to the French Laundry. We were going to Michelin star-rated restaurants, James Beard Award restaurants. I went out and I bought a Maserati cash, he tells me. But after weeks and months of this, There I was eating a $300 lunch, looking across the table at my wife, and I said, is this it? Is this it? Just going places? Just going crazy places, buying stuff, eating food? Is this it? He goes, Jesse, it wasn't fulfilling. His nets were empty. And just like Peter's nets came up empty out of that water time and time and time again, what this passage is telling us is that when we put things ahead of God, we will find that we are empty. Jesus alone brings true and lasting fulfillment. But what does Peter do? What does Jesus do for Peter? He brings him back to the beginning. He says, cast your nets on the right side of the boat. That's the exact same thing he said to him before. And this swarm of fish comes in. It comes flooding, teeming into it. They can't even pull it in the boat. They can't even haul it into the boat. And John tells him, it is the Lord. And what does Peter do? Like a wild man. And this is just a random detail that gets thrown in there because it's just what John remembers. Peter wraps his garment around him, ties it around his waist, and dives headfirst into the water. And when you get a glimpse of who Jesus really is, and maybe you've forgotten, maybe you've fizzled out, maybe your faith has dwindled, but when he re-enchants you, when he patiently reinvigorates you, when he fans those flames again, I hope that you dive headfirst into the water. And guess what? This time for Peter, it sticks. There's no looking back. He still stumbles. Paul has to confront him one time. But there's no turning back for Peter after this point. There's no looking back. For the rest of his life, he is head first, gung-ho for the kingdom of God. And I hope we would react that way as well. And on the topic of water, there's going to be a baptism today. You know, Peter plunges headfirst in the water after Jesus, and you're going to have the opportunity to do the same thing, but don't dive because it's very shallow. Our next thought, so go back to the beginning. He reminds him of how he first called him. He reminds him of how empty life was without him. He reminds him of how patient, how good, how loving he is to fulfill him once again. Our next thought today is going to come down from just a little further on. We're going to jump down to their conversation over the dinner. And he says, when they had finished eating, this is verse 15, when they had finished eating, Jesus said to Simon Peter, Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these? Or some translation puts it, do you love me more than they do? He said, yes, Lord, you know that I love you. And Jesus said, feed my lambs. Simon, son of John, do you love me? He answered, yes, Lord, you know that I love you. Take care of my sheep. The third time he said to them, Simon, son of John, do you love me? Peter was hurt because Jesus asked him a third time, do you love me? Lord, you know all things, just a passing reference to the fact that Jesus is God. You know all things. You know that I love you. Feed my sheep. Our next thought is when you want to come back to Jesus, focus on serving, not on winning. Focus on serving, not on winning. Because he goes to him, hey, Peter, do you love me more than they do? He points to the other disciples. Why does he do this? Because one of the last times they hung out, that's exactly what Peter said. He said, Jesus, even if all of them betray you, I'll never betray you. I'll go to prison for you. I'll go to death for you, Jesus. And a few minutes later, a servant girl comes to him and he curses the very name of Jesus, swears to God that he never knew Jesus. And so he goes, hey, Peter, do you love me more than they do? Do you love me more than they do? And what he's doing is he's rearranging Peter's perceptions of what true greatness is. Luke tells us that once again that same night, all the disciples had been arguing about who is the greatest. Who's the greatest? Who's the greatest? They wanted to win. Scoreboard, baby, scoreboard. Who's making the most shots for Jesus? Like, Peter's like, I'm the rock, baby. Like, you can count on me. Like, look at Rain Dance, baby. He's just, boasting constantly, always putting himself first. But Jesus is showing him that the kingdom of God is not about winning. The kingdom of God isn't about dunking on the sheep. It's about feeding the sheep. And he had actually alluded to this that night when he warned him. He said, hey, Peter, Satan's gunning for you, but I've prayed for you that when you return, you will strengthen your brethren. That instead of putting your brethren on blast, rather than instead of conquering your brethren, you'd strengthen your brethren. You'd love your brethren. That life actually isn't about winning. Life is about serving. It's about building others up. It's about loving others. And I just want to say this, there are some people in church, this always happens, and now counterculture is 2 years old, and you start to hear it. People go, I love counterculture, I love welcoming skeptics, but I want to go deep. Jesse, I hunger for the deep things of God, And that's good. That is good. And we want that. And we're actually rolling out some things with dinner parties that are going to provide opportunity for that. But I think this passage has something to say to each of us, and that's this. That true spiritual maturity is loving and serving the immature. Do you see that? What does Jesus say to him? He says, feed my lambs. Don't conquer my lambs. Don't flex on my lambs. Don't show, I know Greek. I got a theological PhD on my lambs. I know so much more than you, my lambs. No, he says, feed my lambs. True spiritual depth isn't showing everybody else how strong you are. True spiritual depth is serving the weak. That's what true depth is. And he's rearranging Peter's priorities. But he's also being gracious because he's saying, hey, guess what, Peter? You do got a spot on the team. You still are a shepherd. Even though you blew it, even though you biffed it, even though you face planted, you still got a spot. You can still be a shepherd. So there's both a challenge and grace. Oh, John said in John chapter 1, the glory of Jesus is that he's full of grace and truth. And so he's showing Peter grace and truth. He's rearranging his priorities. Now we're going to jump down to the spot where Jesus says, truly I tell you, when you were young, you dressed yourself and you went where you wanted. But when you're old, you stretch out your hands and someone else will dress you. And that's talking about crucifixion. Stretching out your hands, that was a euphemism for being crucified, okay? And Peter is going to be crucified in Rome under Caesar Nero, upside down. That's how Peter's going to go out. But he says, you're going to die for me. That's how you're going to glorify God. Follow me, Peter. And Peter turned and he goes, Jesus is like, hey, Peter, one day you're going to die for me. And he goes, what about this guy? What about him? What about John? What's going to happen to him? Like, that's his immediate reaction. And isn't that human nature? This is comparison. He's comparing himself with John. And we know that in the disciples, there was tons of comparison, right? They're arguing about the greatness. You know that like the lesser known disciples, like Nathaniel, just like these other, not very impressive, not very famous disciples like Andrew, they probably compared themselves with Peter. But Peter, who's the one they're probably all comparing themselves with because he's the rock, who's he comparing himself with? John. Oh, John got to sit next to him at the Last Supper. I wish I could have sat next to him there. It's just human nature. No matter how much you win, you're always going to want to win more. There's always going to be somebody else. I could give you a lot of examples of this, but I'm just going to be very vulnerable and give you one from my own life. I don't talk about this often, but I come from a family of 5 kids. There's lots of competition, lots of sibling rivalry. I mean, sometimes our family group texts are like a war zone. You don't even want to know about it. But I have a brother who's 8 years older than me. He's really successful, very influential, very well known. And in a real part of my life, it really bothers me when strangers ask me about this. But a real part of my life is dealing with comparison. Having this brother who's 8 years older than me, who's preached in NFL stadiums and whatnot. Comparison can be a very real thing. And God has done so much work in my own heart. But one time, him and I were having a conversation about this outside of the hospital where my dad was dying. And we were talking about this, kind of having a deep, real moment. And he goes, Jesse, yeah, you may compare yourself with me. I'm 8 years older. I've had the success I've had. Because you know that I struggle with comparison all the time. I see people who are more successful than me. I never feel satisfied. I'm always looking at the next person. It is a treadmill. It is a treadmill. It is a hamster wheel. It may be a golden hamster wheel, but looking at the person who makes more, looking at the person who gets more attention, looking at the person, whether it's here at church, the person who speaks more. Oh, I wish I could preach more like he does, or I wish I could do this, or it's the girl who's prettier than you, or the person with the bigger house, or the person with more Instagram followers. The reality is, it is a never-ending cycle, a never-ending treadmill. And what Jesus is saying in this passage, he's saying, don't spend your life comparing with those who have more. Follow me and spend your life sharing with those who have less. That's what true fulfillment is about. And that was what set me free years ago of saying, you know what? I'm not going to go, I wish I was more famous. I wish I had more Instagram followers. I wish I was preaching in football stadiums. Why is my life, it's so easy to get in this comparison place. Like you feel like everywhere I move, a cloud follows me. It's always raining on me. No matter what, that's easy in Portland, but like anywhere you go, just, you're like Eeyore, the cloud is following you. And then you look over the other way and it's like, he's got Skittles raining on him. He's under the spout where the glory comes out. He's just like amazed. But here's the deal. Here's the deal. What Jesus is telling him is that rather than having your eyes on John, have your eyes on me. Follow me. Trust my purposes for your life. And Peter literally was going to be crucified upside down. He was going to have that happen to him. And from what we can tell, John was tortured, but John actually didn't die. He eventually died on Patmos. He goes out of his way to make sure that's clear in this passage, that he wasn't going to live forever. But all of us are going to have to stretch out our hands. And what God has taught me as he's kind of uprooted the idols in my heart, the idols of fame, the idols of success, the idols of fortune, of really choosing to live a life where you're serving others instead of trying to one-up others. Because one other thought I want to say is that when you live your life trying to win, looking at the scoreboard, living life like a competition, it doesn't fill you with love or joy or peace. It fills you with hate. It fills you with sadness. It fills you with rage. It fills your relationships with strife. And what I realized is that the truest life is a life where you look like Jesus. And that when you're trying to be better than the sheep, no matter which sheep it is, you can't love the sheep. To really actually love the sheep. But all of us have to, what God really taught me is to learn to live my life with hands open. To say, God, what do you want for my life? I know what I want. I want this. I want to be in football stadiums. I want to be doing this. But God, what do you want for my life? Just to completely surrender. And it feels like being crucified. It's scary to do that. Check out this quote from C.S. Lewis. C.S. Lewis says, the terrible, the almost impossible thing, I love that, the terrible thing, the almost impossible thing is to hand over your whole self, all your wishes, all your precautions to Christ. But it's far easier than what we're all trying to do instead, trying to let our mind and our heart go their own way, centered on money or pleasure or ambition, and hoping that in spite of all of these things, to behave. I'm going to be a good person, but what I care about is making lots of money. Oh, I want to be a good person, but what I really care about is, having the rockin' bod. It's like, but to really surrender your life, to Jesus. One other thought is that Jesus said over and over again, if you exalt yourself, you'll be humbled. But if you humble yourself, you'll be exalted. And Peter was constantly trying to exalt yourself. And if you're constantly trying to get an angle and rise the ranks and connive and scheme and manipulate, the Bible says you're going to be humbled. But if you humble yourself, you'll be exalted. And Peter eventually learned this lesson. Because get this, there's nothing wrong with having big dreams. There's nothing wrong with having grand ambitions. But the question is, can you surrender those dreams to God? Can you surrender them and wait on his timing? And not that you're passive, but that you're not going to try to manipulate your way and go against his word to get what you want. And Peter learned that lesson. We're going to actually study it later. At the end of his letter of 1 Peter, he says, humble yourselves under the mighty hand of God, and at the perfect time, he will lift you up. Isn't that beautiful? All right, so when you got to come back, go back to the beginning, focus on serving rather than on winning. And then our final thought this morning is to eat with Jesus before you go for Jesus. Eat with Jesus before you go for Jesus. My favorite thing in this passage is he's telling him to feed the lambs. He's telling him to tend the sheep. He's telling him to feed the sheep. But what did Jesus just do? He literally fed them. He literally fed them breakfast. He's telling Peter to die for him. Peter, one day you're going to die for me. One day your hands are going to be stretched out for him. But long before Peter would stretch out his hands for Jesus, Jesus stretched out his hands for Peter. And before we can try to serve God, we need to let God serve us. And that's the beautiful thing. And I want to say this literally, to eat with Jesus before you go for Jesus. I'm talking about Tuesday morning. I'm talking about Wednesday morning before you go to Intel. I'm talking about Thursday morning before some of you go teach in PPS. I'm talking about Friday morning before some of you do remote work for Nike. That was a little joke because, remote work. But anyways, before all of those things, I'm asking you to eat with Jesus, because the Bible compares itself, interestingly enough, uses a lot of metaphors. Obviously, we're not sheep. I hope you know that sheep is a metaphor for people, right? The word pastor means shepherd. But the Bible compares itself to food. It's called bread. It's called honey. It's called milk. It's called meat. For all of you, that could be gluten-free oat milk, non-veg, vegan, whatever. But the point is that it's nourishment. It's nourishment. And a lot of us live emaciated, malnourished Christian lives. But what if you just took 15 minutes before you went to Intel? What if you before you go be a barista at the coffee shop, before you go work at the daycare, before you go take your kids and get them to school, what if you took 15 minutes and just read a psalm? What if you just took some time before you went into work thinking about God, praying to God? What if you pulled out your calendar? This is something I've been trying to do. You pulled out your calendar in the morning and you thought about, I'm going to that budget meeting. I'm going to that production management meeting. I'm going to that. And you pictured the people in that meeting and you prayed for them. A lot of you would be more on time to your meetings if you did that. But wouldn't you go in with a different attitude before you walked into the hospital if you'd prayed for your patients and prayed for your coworkers? Man, wouldn't it be amazing? Eat with Jesus before you go for Jesus. It is a game changer. This is basic discipleship. This is not advanced stuff. This is basic Christian living that Christians have been doing for 2,000 years. Eat with Jesus before you go for Jesus. And I just think it's so beautiful. But as we move in and transition towards communion, we're seeing here that before Peter was to go out and feed the sheep, he was to be a sheep and be fed by Jesus. Jesus made him breakfast. Jesus fed him. Our God is a servant. Peter denied him. Peter, in a shame and honor culture, he basically spat in his face, like he turned his back on him. And how does our God respond? He responds in grace. He responds in mercy. He makes a delicious breakfast. He takes him back to the beginning of his story to remind him of how fulfilling a life in God is and how empty a life without God is. He does all of that for him, and he serves him. He loves him. And Jesus, we're about to share a meal with Jesus, or rather, Jesus is about to share a meal with us. Because that's what communion is. You see, the Christian life is not about living morally and looking down on all the people who don't. There are some people, there's cultural Christianity, right? Cultural Christianity may say, I'm going to live my life right with God, and I'm going to look down on all the people who live their lives wrong. But that is not the Christian life of the Bible. That may be cultural Christianity. It's not true Christianity. And I want you to know this morning that at the heart of the Bible, at the heart of Jesus, at the heart of counterculture, is the truth that our God is the God of second chances. Our God is the God of grace. Our God is the God of redemption. Our God is the God who always has a fresh start for you. And even if you do wander from counterculture and you go out and you do your own thing and you go and live your own way, I want you to know that the door will always be open for you. It will always be waiting for you with a hot cup of coffee and a donut hole that Ben and Samira bought. It'll be waiting for you. And there won't be an ounce of judgment. There won't be an ounce of superiority, because all of us deep down, if we are true followers of Christ, know that Jesus was patient with Peter, and Jesus will be patient with each of us. That's what it's all about. And I think there is a warning here for us as well, because if Peter can fail this badly and not see it coming, each of us can. Grace is free, but it's not cheap. And each week here at Counterculture, we take communion. We take this little wafer. You can pass it out, guys, if you want. We take this for thousands of years, Christians have been doing this. Jesus told us to. We take this little wafer of bread, which is a symbol of Jesus' perfect life and his sinless body. And then we take this little juice, and it's a symbol of Jesus' sacrifice and the blood that poured out on the cross. And why do we do this? It seems strange, but I'll tell you why we do this. If Peter can fail this badly, then each of us can. Check out this quote by Jack Miller. Jack Miller says, "We are more sinful and flawed than we ever dared believed. Yet in Jesus, we are more loved and accepted than we ever dared hope." See, forgiveness is free, but it's not cheap. Have you ever been betrayed? Have you ever had someone really hurt you and break your heart? Have you ever had someone stab you in the back? Have you ever had someone really wrong you, abuse you, hurt you? To forgive someone like that costs you something. Forgiveness always costs you something, psychologically, emotionally, spiritually. And what the cross is, what the cup is, what the wafer is, what the blood is it's a symbol that Jesus looked us in the eye, knowing that we are worse than we even want to admit to ourselves. And he said, "I love you. I'm willing to pay the cost." Forgiveness always costs something. And the cross is the ultimate symbol of God looking us in the soul and saying, I'm willing to pay the cost. Let's take the bread and the cup together.